there was this mystery about snowboarding at that point. Like mainstream media always wanted to have a part of action sports, whether it be skating, surfing, snowboarding. The reason that they wanted to be part of that is because we were so weird and different. We were so unusual. We had different rules. We had different lingo. And I always say, like, the spine of snowboarding and skateboarding was based on the middle finger. It was like, it was
Mhm.
dangerous. It was scary a little bit. You know, you had people like Sean Palmer out there, and like, God, that guy's terrifying.
Welcome to Going Off, a podcast about snowboard history.
As the early days of snowboard culture slide into the past, we're documenting its oral history.
We're tracing back what made it so strange and explosive, why it changed all those lives and still bonds people for life.
From the history of snowboard fashion to how half-pipes were born,
From the birth of jibbing to movies, music, and magazines.
each episode drops in on something new. I'm one of your hosts, Tricia Burns.
And I'm your other host, Jennifer Shurowski. We've traveled the world together for decades, riding and just living the way of life we call snowboarding. And now we're ready to get in the Wayback Machine. I think we're recording now.
Let's fucking go off.
Oh man, I don't know what's going on.
Jen, I wore my holiday sweatshirt for the holiday
I love
grab
it.
bag. So what are we talking about today?
Well, this is a unique episode. As you were just saying, it's a holiday. So we're going to take a bit of like vacay from our typical like C-rate investigative journalism, or like B-rate. Let's be fair.
82% accurate, B minus.
Yeah, 82, 83%, to do what we're calling this a snowboard history variety show. So we're going to go behind the scenes a little bit on a few of the episodes that have already come out. It was interesting. Every episode that drops, we get like, we'll instantly be getting like texts and people like chiming in the chat with sort of their own stories or questions
Updates.
or facts or trying to debunk things. So yeah, we're just excited to kind of bring to light some of this mistier backstory and interesting information that has come to life since some of these episodes have dropped. So yeah, this episode's for the heads, as they say, the hardcore going off community. Do we have one? Do we have one of those? So yeah, we're going to talk James Bond. We're going to talk snowboard graphic cease and desist letters. We're going to talk about one of the first private proto superpipes, and yeah, just a bunch more stuff.
Yeah, we also wanted to take this time to say thank you and like just thanks to our community, thanks to everyone who's been listening to us, talking to us, like dropping it in the comments, and also for all the people like the Trent Bushes, the Chris Doyles, the Mike Chantrys, the historians of the snowboarding world who have come out and shared their knowledge and their timelines. Lee Crane, Frank Wells, Todd Richards, like everybody that we've reached out to, and then also the other podcasts that we've been definitely like mining for some intel and info, and just like all the stories out there, we're trying to bring them in together, and it's just been super fun, and we're super grateful to everyone that's participated. And that should be your note to encourage you to text us more, send us your messages, tell us more amazing things, and we'll do our best to share it.
Yeah, we've got so much game from so many other people. Like, this isn't just about the two of us, it's like a kind of a group experiment, if you will. So yeah, so thanks to everyone. All right, we're going to kick it off. First up, we need to talk about James Bond, 85 era. Yeah, Was that Duran Duran?
That's the soundtrack.
1985, A View to a Kill comes out. There's a snowboard sequence in that. And, this is classic era James Bond when he was being played by Roger Moore. And, Christopher Walken plays the bad guy, and Grace Jones, she plays the like sexy, scary kind of love interest. Mayday is her name. But yeah, we dropped a clip of the snowboard sequence on our Instagram, and it was super interesting. It got so many people just had things to say about it, a lot of chatter, just general excitement, but also theories and comments, and like, is it Tom Sims? Is it not Tom Sims stunt doubling? So we just wanted to take a minute and like kind of dive into that and set the record straight a little bit.
Yeah, so for those of you who haven't seen it, it's the chase scene is what's cool about it is it's before the title sequence in A View to a Kill. So this is like the opening scene is this dramatic ski chase. Bond is being pursued by skiers. A bevy of Russian soldiers are on his tail, a helicopter. He's skiing. One ski gets blown off. He commandeers a snowmobile. Of course, this blows up, and then the snowmobile ski becomes a snowboard. And so basically he starts slashing everything in sight. He drops this huge cornice. Like, it's really quite big, especially on that snowboard. There's a ton of going on. The minute he steps on the snowboard, it starts playing the Beach Boys, California Girls, which is just hilarious because it's like surf vibes, while you're also getting shot by 1,000 bullets by like 25 different...
On the top of a mountain.
Yeah, on the top of a mountain from, a variety of other skiers and helicopters and other sources. So, yeah, the music wasn't shared in that clip that we had shown, just probably because of music rights issues. But anyway, like 1,000 bullets are shot at James Bond. He shoots one flare and the helicopter, goes down. Everyone dies. He like slinks away into this iceberg that is also opens up and is a submarine. Of course, he rolls in with like a bottle of vodka and some like sexy maven is driving the submarine. It's like Bond at its greatest.
Yeah. Total Bond trope to be like, there's always a scene in the Alps. There's always some sort of like ski scene. And I looked this up actually. So up until this point, when this kind of snowboard sequence happens, he had been in 4 other movies skiing. So it was On Her Majesty's Secret Service, The Spy Who Loved Me, For Your Eyes Only. Like kind of he'd been skiing in all of these films. And this was sort of like you could see, it's just interesting. Someone on this production obviously was a snowboarder because they sort of clued into the fact that like you can tell they're nodding back to the skiing in the previous, movies, but they're like, no, there's this cool new thing. We should have him doing that because Bond's stylish and they want him to seem like he knows what's up. And like, it's just cool because it's like a first. It's probably the first time a lot of people saw snowboarding, I mean,
totally.
this was like big for me because I saw it in the theater when I was little. 85 I was 8. And this was probably one of the first movies I saw in the theater, and I just remember it so vividly. And
it's funny though because he goes back to skiing in other films. Like there's 6 films I think that he skis in, and 1 he snowboards in.
Yeah. What's that all about? We need to find out more. Who worked on that production? Come at us. Shoot us an email.
Yeah, so let's talk about the stunt riders in there. So like you mentioned, Tom Sims is notably in that movie as James Bond, but also Steve Link was there, who was a Sims team rider at the time. And Steve does that big cornice drop. He's taller, has darker hair. You can't really tell when you really look at it. Apparently he had to shave his beard for the film though. And like in the whole sequence, the furry hood is up over their faces, sunglasses are on, so they're pretty well disguised. But most of the other riding is Tom. He does the pond skim. He does all those like classic Tom Sims, like arms up kind of carves. When we talked to Trevor Graves, who's a legendary photographer, he was saying that Tom had the board from the shoot and he used to bring it around to events, and you could just tell the black paint was starting to peel off the top sheet, but he was, really proud of that experience. And Scott Klum had said that too, that Tom was actually really stoked and proud to be a part of that shoot. And I actually got to see that board a couple weeks ago with Trent Bush up at the Colorado Snow Sports Museum up in Vail. So it's really cool. It's like front and center. It's right there when you walk in the door. So if you're in Vail, take a peek in and turn to the right, and it's there with the whole scene and the board. And it's cool. Another thing that was interesting in the stunt section is like, watch that cornice drop. The bindings on that, it's the board with the bindings with like one screw holding it on, and his feet, like they look like they come off the whole board and then get up and ride away.
Levitate up. Yeah. No, it was that was pretty big for there, and he does butt check, and then he kind of gets up and rides away.
We're calling that a make, girl.
It's a make. If he was a skier, that would be a make. So we tracked down this awesome interview in MI6-HQ .com, which I think is kind of like a Bond nerdery sort of publication. So it's an interview with Steve Link, and there's so much awesome just sort of BTS. Like they actually have the original storyboards from shooting the movie, which is so cool to see those. And anyway, he was saying they had to really like mod his board out a lot because they had to make it look like it was a snowmobile ski. So he was like, it looked like a fat water ski. Both my mountaineering boots and board were an art project with metal copper pipes screwed on and spray painted. So first of all, mountaineering boots, no snowboarding boots. He's wearing mountaineering boots, but he was just saying they spray painted both the top and the bottom. So like the board was so slow because it had freaking paint on the bottom. He said, he was quoted as saying it was a drag, literally. Well played. He also was talking a bit about some of the explosives and sort of things going on where they apparently like set and triggered all these small explosives in the snow all around them as they were riding because, the Russian soldiers were shooting them. And so they had to, the explosives were to make it look like the bullets were hitting the snow. So as they're riding down, there's all these like little mini explosives going off. And he was saying, they took a lot of precautions, but there was one proposed stunt that he refused to do. He said they were setting up to do a big jump over a large 100-foot crevasse in the ice. It could be done on skis, but the snowboard that I was on made it too dangerous. Fucking 100-foot crevasse. Like, holy shit.
In like slushy, like glacier snow, it's super sticky. You have a board that's basically spray paint. On the bottom.
Yeah. Good call to not do it. He said, I didn't think I could pull it off with the snowboard, which, that sounds sketch.
No one to back down. Yeah, he also said they were instructed not to hike around since it was dangerous with all the crevasses that you might fall into, and that they saw 3 or 4 avalanches a day. And this was filmed on the border of Switzerland and Italy in the Italian Alps, just over the border from St. Moritz. But yeah, when you watch the scene, it looks really slushy, warm spring snow. Dirty.
Well, now let's move on to snowboard graphics. So we dropped an episode. Our episode 2 was the snowboard graphics revolution, and this was such a rich topic. All of the listeners and people in the chat were like, I don't know, just really lit up about it. And board graphics are such a, like, you get why, because they're such a personal topic. Like, everyone has boards they were connected to for different reasons. And it is so cool hearing the backstory behind any kind of art in general.
Totally.
And, we know that we missed a ton. You guys let us know.
We can't get them
Good
all,
job.
Obviously. We're not trying to get all of them. We're just trying to touch on a few, but more to come.
It was more about, like, how can we track the changes and stuff, and less about, like, let's list every board. But, more on that later. Right now, we want to dive into a new section we're calling Fantelligence. Basically, this is, like, what do we hear from you in terms of stories, cockamamie theories, questions? We've done some fact-checking on some of this. And because there was just some interesting, things people were positing. And I gotta say, it was like pretty intriguing.
Yeah, totally. So with the graphics one, we were told that we told the story of the Solomon no graphics board from 1996-97 season. They were just solid metallic colors. And 53 Bicycles commented on Instagram that they had heard from the sales rep that the first year Solomon colors were from Porsche. And others that worked there have said, no way. They wanted to find out. So we actually hit up Brad Stewart, and he let us know that the colors were not from Porsche, but they were definitely looking at and thinking about cars, and were mostly looking at Saab, actually. So there is your Mythbuster.
Yeah, it's myth affirmation. Like, it's true they were thinking about, kind of metallic color, like
Cars.
car metallics, but that it was different European brand, Swedish brand.
A different red.
Okay, while we're talking Brad in this episode, we also told the story via Brad of, like, Sean Palmer getting his first pro model graphic in 1992, and kind of told, like, the backstory to that, and how it was really one of the first and best examples of, like, a pro model graphic becoming the embodiment of a snowboarder's personality. And it was really cool. We did a couple Palmer posts, and it was like, I don't know, so much love for Palmer, like just and him and his board, but also just like what he represents in that he has never given two shits about what people think of him, and he probably never will. And like just that, truly just such a dynamic personality that likes to be the center of attention. It's like you need those characters in culture, and it was, I don't know, just cool to see that recognized,
especially like early on in a sport, to kind of like have those big people to carry the whole thing on their backs and draw attention to it.
Yeah, totally. And Cody Dresser, who legendary pro in the 90s era, and then he became went on to work at Transworld Snowboarding magazine. We worked there together. He's the best. I love Cody. Now he works at Monster, but he said about Palmer, one of the most impactful snowboard figures of all time, larger than life, rock star status. And Mia Lamson, who just dropped that awesome Wayward documentary on the history of women's snowboarding, which we can't wait to see. She said, the world needs a current day Palmer. We need that manic energy back in snowboarding. So it's so cool to see someone from like the younger generation just sort of recognizing that
influence.
All of like, that influence that like adds to the culture in a way, or what we want the culture to be, depending on who we are. But on the topic of Palmer, interesting factoid we learned after we dropped the episode that he was saying he made like $60,000 off the royalties from that first pro model with the clown on the bottom, or sorry, the clown on the top and the American flag on the bottom. And he was like 22 or 23 at the time. We looked that up. That's like $137,000 in today's money. So he was like he's riding in style from that board.
And you could tell because he was always wearing those like shiny suits, and his Cadillac collection, I think, started to increase after that paycheck.
Yeah, he had a caddy collection, just kept getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah. And speaking of pro models, we also talked to Russell Winfield, and apparently his legendary pro model that we talked about, which is featuring the character Russell from Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids, which sold a ton of models. Apparently he got a cease and desist from Bill Cosby's people partway through the season. They're like, stop it. I'm like, okay, cool, but we've already made our mark in history with this board. People will remember it forever. But Russell said that they sent all the rest of the leftover boards to Japan, and then at the time they were doing 2 graphics a season, and so they did a new graphic, which was basically a rip on a Japanese pro baseball team logo. But I haven't seen that board.
Yeah, graphic. I'll have to text Russell, and I haven't. I'll have to text him and see if he has any imagery of that. But it's definitely, you can feel, first of all, 2 graphics a year.
Like what planet are you living in? Now it's like 2 graphics every 4 years.
Yeah, and you could tell they're kind of riffing on sort of, it was like a trend in the 90s that like skate brands like World Industries famously was doing that, where they were kind of co-opting logos and sort of graphics from popular brands and popular culture, and like making them their own in a really clever way, and then knowing they were probably going to get a cease and desist, and the second they got it, they would just like move on to something else, like just, oh, well, we don't need it anymore. We already got the notoriety from it. Exactly. So, but skating so much lower stakes, it's like, it's pretty impressive.
A piece
that they
of
kind
wood. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like higher stakes, more expensive, super wild.
And one season, like you have a snowboard season and skate season, you have like the full year is basically a season. Like you can have 10 seasons in a year.
One season, but really like before Christmas. Isn't that
for
your
skateboarding?
Season, like fall? No, for like snowboarding.
Oh yeah,
you
yeah.
know? It's like
you have a 3-month window to get that thing out there and purchased.
That's why the 2 graphics a year thing seems so wild. We'll find out more and report back.
Or delete this part.
Or delete this whole little rant. All right.
Felt cute. Delete later.
Now we got another little nugget back to Brad. There's not that many people that have like are able to have like a view of the entirety of snowboard history. He's just been around for so long, and also just been such like a important part of like leading and driving where snowboarding is going for so long.
And at the table for so long, like with so many different companies.
Table. Yeah, totally. And he has a really good memory, I must say. And talking to him, I was like, wow, like impressive, respect. But we wanted to, I asked him, I was like, who were your favorite graphics? Who was doing it? Who was really doing it? And we just wanted to play the sequence. It hit the cutting room floor in terms of like the original episode was just sort of getting long. But we just loved what he had to say, and he kind of does a nice job of kind of moving through history with his picks and stuff. So yeah, we're gonna play that now.
Yeah, let me just give you kind of my framing for it. Version 1 of snowboarding is we can surf the mountain. Version 2 is actually the mountain is a skate park. Version 3 is actually it's a gigantic skate park. We can surf, we can spin, it's a massive backcountry skate park. Then there's kind of a hard stop that actually says, actually, the mountain is an art gallery. It's a place to express yourself. Boom, Jamie. Boom, boom, Terrier. Boom, Jeff Brushy. All these people who were Travis, all these guys who were just expressing themselves in a different way. Actually, from small to big, all of the movement guys, Matt Donahue, Chris Brunkart, all those guys in Portland, that whole scene. And so it kind of, we went from like stadium rock, thinking to like all these cool little record labels. And everybody had their own little vibe. And it was almost like if you wanted a certain vibe, you went to a certain snowboard. All of them kind of worked the same. There wasn't a whole lot of difference. You had factories cranking out 14, 15 labels. So, to me, things that stand out, I actually do think what the movement did was pretty seminal. For the time, it was really simple, really graphic, and really, really beautiful. I actually think Joyride brought a new customer into the table. They kind of riffed on, Noah Selaznick was just kind of one of those guys who's like, man, skateboarding and snowboarding are kind of one thing to me, slightly different, footwear and apparel, but they're kind of one thing to me. I just want a skateboard on my graphic. Cool, that's easy. We got that. um, that was kind of a seminal graphic, I think, because that really just kind of named it for what it is. This is a graphics game. I do think Burton had a lot of great graphics. Michael Jagger to me is Burton, actually. And what he did, with his crew there was just incredible. The brushy graphics stand out, I think, is something that really kind of changed the game. I think Arbor opened up a new chapter, which almost kind of harkened back to what we were trying to do with Solomon. It came back to materials and kind of an authenticity in graphics and craft. Certainly Sean Palmer kicked off a bunch of stuff, and everybody, there was a time, when kind of everybody was looking to Sean and saying, hey, we gotta come up with a graphic like that. So those are kind of the things that I think were out there. And my tastes aren't really toward mainstream snowboarding. So brands like Type A were important to me, and they had done kind of cool things. And I see, like, you look at Academy today, it's Type A.
Yeah.
30 years ago. And so Type A was always kind of interesting to me, and just this clean, cool presentation. But there's a million. I mean,
I know.
Jamie Lynn, I think, captured a sense of self and environment probably better than anyone, because you cannot look at those graphics and not think of Baker in the Northwest. And,
Yeah.
he's almost like the Cezanne of snowboarding in a way. You look at a Cezanne and you go right back to France in that era. You look at a Jamie's graphics through time and you go right back to Seattle, and you can hear the music, and you're at Baker, so those are kind of some of the highlights.
All right, another person we got so much great intel from was Lance Violette, Burton graphics god. When it comes to Tricia, I was thinking about when it comes to Burton graphics, like especially after the early years, like there's almost too many to talk about.
Agree.
It needs to be like its own thing, because it's such like a force basically. But so a lot of, the really great graphics, like Lance played a hand in leading them, but we wanted to just drop in a little sequence of him talking about the birth of Uninc, which is the core writer and art driven line that lasted for a few years there in the 2000s, and it generated a lot of attention at the time. And Uninc was really, I learned in the course of talking to him, it was born out of the Seven series, and so he was talking about kind of how risky it was for Burton to even put like a skull on the base of their snowboard. So this was for the Seven series when he was working on that for with them, and like how, even just like a skull was like really not. It felt very different from who Burton was as a brand, and it was like a full like knockdown drag out fight to kind of get that to happen, basically.
Yeah, interesting to think that a brand like that, at a time like that, when it was always, like, rider-driven, that, there would be this friction, or they've built up this empire that they're afraid to, like, take a risk, essentially.
Yeah, totally. But what he did say is like, all the risks that he fought for were calculated risks, and they weren't just to like shock at all. And he did say, he was like, a few years later, I met a dude at a party who he found out who he was. He knew he like did Burton graphics, and he was like rolled up his sleeve and showed him he had that skull tattoo from that Seven series board. And he was like, Lance was just like, holy shit. It was just that's a real you have arrived moment for an artist or graphic designer to like have someone have their shit tattooed on their body. So anyway, here we're dropping in, right after that story for Lance is going to kind of tell the story of the birth of Uninc.
The appetite for risk was there, but it was create a controlled environment where we could be risky, because then that evolved into Uninc, which is the thing that I probably get asked about the most, was what we created with Uninc. And I think back, I'm like, that was the last kind of gasp in the snowboard industry of like, just do something. Like they gave us the keys. Like even the board product managers at Burton didn't know what we were doing.
Like it was truly, you guys do what you want, and it's going to be this own, almost slightly separate from Burton, yet of Burton little world with these progressive riders, and you're going to get to really like push the envelope.
And it just kind of a lot, like the track I had been on and the kind of graphics and the kind of work I had always done.
Yeah.
It was just the right time, right place for me to be sitting in front of, Gigi and Jeffy and like these guys and JP and Roman and like it was just the perfect time to for us to all do that and definitely ruffle a lot of feathers like internally. And that one was all about risk. I'm not the type to just like kind of put something, like Big Brother-esque kind of stripper on the snowboard and just be like, there's that. It was like concept. So I would show these guys artists like that I'd find, and that everybody would kind of pick one. And then one year I stretched 6 canvases, and each canvas went to an artist. They were all over the world.
Oh, wow.
Like one of them was like a dude, like you always got to have some of these, like the dude that DCP knew from surfing in Costa Rica. Like, you got to hook up my buddy.
Yes.
And I made it work for stuff like that, because that is important to these guys. But everybody got a canvas, and I had very specific instructions, and the canvases were kind of like on the side laid out like numbered zones. And it was, you got to do something in your style. And these were artists that had, pretty risky imagery, like whether it was, super sexual kind of imagery or like super violent stuff in their kind of world. And I gave them, like basically
you gave them
blanche.
parameters. Oh, wow. Okay.
Like
Did
carte
you give
blanche
them
to do whatever they
ideas?
wanted, but I gave them areas of the board.
Gotcha.
Because that's another thing, more of kind of the design guy in me would kick in. You got to make it, balance and feel right on the board too.
Yeah.
So
I would tell them this stuff, and they'd have 1 week, and then at the end of 1 week, they all had a FedEx label that they put on, and the artwork all shifted to the next person.
Oh,
So
wow.
by the end, every canvas was hit by all 6 of them.
I see. Oh, wow.
But they did kind of whatever they wanted, and that's where, that's when we kind of did our first, like, all right, well, how about we let Roman leave this art on the board and we put it in the black bag, and we did
Right.
stuff like that. Or, some of the imagery I had to just go in and Photoshop and change, because some of it had, more like suicidal,
Yeah, you had to
imagery, and
slightly
even
tone it down. Yeah.
yeah, and even me, like, I was
You're
always, like,
like,
really
"That."
fighting for everything, but even me, I'm like, "Yeah, all right,
Yeah.
I get it." Like, doing graphics like that and really getting the personality of these riders, and to, like, get to know each one of them and see, like, how smart and how creative these guys are, like,
Yeah.
uh, it was just so awesome. But we would go from graphics like that we need to, kinda force through the HR channels and everything, and
Get the lawyers to
put
look
in a
at.
bag, yeah, and then we went to, I think it wasn't, maybe it was like 2 seasons after that, they all came to Vermont that time. I took them to a bowling alley, and and I pulled out I'm like, "We're gonna do this," and that was like the little puppy dog
Oh,
and
yeah.
like the little kitten,
Yes.
and the bright colors, and they just all just jumped on it. I didn't even have to sell the concept most
Right.
of, like, I had my whole thing ready to
Right.
go
But
of,
there
like,
was no sell-in that needed to
there
happen.
was
It
no
was
set. They
visceral.
just saw
Yeah.
it and they thought it was like, they're like,
Oh,
"That's so
beautiful.
cool. I want the kitten. I want the monkey." Like, and
How cool.
so we could go from boards we had to put in a bag to, like, next thing I know, I'm running an ad with, like, we're in a studio, and I'm hiring, like, a person that comes in with little puppies and kittens to, and I'm handing Danny was on Uninc at that time, and I'm handing
Oh, yeah.
Danny like 2 kittens, and I'm like, this is gonna be the ad." So that there was that, like, kind of, and that was its own kind of risk. And Uninc itself, just the nature of the whole thing, we didn't write Burton on those boards.
Yeah.
Um, it was, like, the many levels to that when you kind of look at it at, from a standpoint of risk. But it was in its own little thing,
It was like
and
a
something,
controlled risk, like you said,
yeah,
ultimately it's for a
you
small
had to
group of
kind of,
people and
give it in
yeah.
its own.
Yeah.
And it really worked, not because of, like, the graphics or, the riders, like, they were all, like, the best at that time and, like, pushing it, but it was the whole thing, like, it was, just a timing thing. So again, it's more about when I think of this notion of risk, it's like the risk needs to be deeper for me than just putting, something
Yeah.
jarring on a board, or something that is going to piss people off, like, piss them off, but, be smart about it. Like, how
Yeah.
you're going to do it has always been my attitude. So those went really well. And then it runs its course. Like, it was, then all of a sudden, reps start getting frustrated because, like, this is my biggest account. How come I can't let them have this board? That's all they want. And
Ah.
then it just can implode. It just implodes and goes away. And
Mm.
then a few years go by, and, they, you start getting itchy for it again, and there'll be some meetings and something else will come along.
So we also wanted to share a little bit more about the original Sin groundbreaking artist series graphics. It happened in 96, 97 also. And we had chatted with Herb George, who alongside Chris Mask was responsible for bringing in that emerging skate and subculture artist to the snowboard graphic scene. We had chatted with Herb for a while, and he was a writer on OSIN and a team manager, and was just like rallied down to New York City's Lower East Side with George Kovala, Seth Neary, and others starved for culture Northern Vermont snowboarders to check out the shows at Alleged Gallery and skate. And these trips sort of birthed that collab with folks like Thomas Campbell, Phil Frost, and Annie Jenkins. And so he has some cool stories about that time and that era that we thought you guys might like to hear.
Yeah, it was a really interesting time. And I think for us living in Burlington, we were kind of starving for culture. There was a group of us that were just really into just trying to be inspired, trying to stay up on culture, and really diving into kind of fashion culture magazines. And myself and George Cavallo were very much into that. And we would find ourselves making trips down to New York City to go to art shows, to go to art openings. And like literally we would drive 5.5 hours, go to the art opening, and then drive back. For us, it was worth it just to get some of that raw kind of art inspiration. And I think that's really what inspired a lot of our ideas at the time. And with Original Sin, as I started getting more connected with Chris and Dan and Lisa, and at the time, I was actually going to University of Vermont for marketing, for business.
Amazing.
And I was talking to them about like, hey, you know, like maybe I can have a job here someday. And they were just like, yeah, just keep going, you know, graduate school, get there first.
Yeah,
and
simmer down.
Simmer down. We'll see what happens. But I started to talk to them about those things, about graphic design. And there was a group of us on the Original Sin team. The Huffmans, Jesse and Lucas, Ali Goulet was one of the first people on there. Myself, Jason King, Jay Rabine, Rob Duncan, Beth Trombley was on there. And that was kind of like the original team. And at the time, I remember talking to people and just being like, oh, we weren't vibing that well with the graphics that were being produced. How can we like, you know, capture this energy that we have and like put it onto a snowboard? We'd feel more connected to the brand if the graphics kind of represented and felt more like what we were feeling at the time. And what had happened is George and I had been talking about it. George was going to like Champlain College and he was like deep in photography, and we would kick around ideas on like, hey, you know, what could we do? And long story short, we ended up meeting Thomas Campbell at Alleged Gallery in New York. Alleged was a gallery run by Aaron Rose, but this was his first gallery on Ludlow Street. We met Thomas there, and we ended up just being like, oh, this would look incredible on a snowboard. They were pretty scrappy at the time, you know, like a lot of them were just skaters and just like partying at night and doing all the things that we were doing. And I think like that's how we got so connected to it. They weren't very successful either, you know, they were just skaters and surfers and making art. Their art just happened to be better than kind of the scribbles that we were doing. And after going down and meeting Thomas, he was connected to the whole slew of other artists that we ended up featuring. He sort of was the kingpin to those connections, including Aaron Rose, who ran Alleged, Dave Aaron, who was creating some of the original graphics, and Thomas knew Andy Jenkins. So really, Thomas was sort of the connection that brought everything together, and our relationship with Thomas. And yeah, it was super exciting.
Do you feel like it was disruptive at the time? Like, how was it received?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in terms of like the industry, like looking back on it, I do think it was fairly unique to what was happening. And for us, it very much was like just passion that was driving it, you know, like we felt connected to it. This is what we wanted to represent. And we were just like following what we believed in and what we liked. And I think having that connection to the team really like helped give like a real authentic vibe, even though like at the top there was this umbrella Dynastar big ski corporation. Like Original Sin still felt pretty authentic. I remember our first trade show that we did, which was in Las Vegas. It was the ski show, basically.
Yeah. With the corner for snowboards,
Yeah, like the piece of an aisle for snowboarding. But we we were fortunate enough to have that Dina-Star budget, so we had a pretty nice booth, I would say, for the time.
Yeah.
And we basically laid out like an art show in our booth, and we hung the snowboards as if they were art, and then we had a bunch of framed art from each of the artists, and we flew Phil Frost out there to just sit and paint at the booth all day to like paint a canvas.
Yeah.
And I remember that being like feeling kind of sort of out of place. I remember going to that trade show and like walking around and going like, oh yeah, we feel like sort of like outsiders in this show.
It's funny. I remember meeting Herb when you're at the US Open. I remember it was like your brother's room, you know how you would walk in and it was like
intimidation.
It would be just like a cloud of smoke. Like you could barely see anyone through the smoke, and you would just, I remember him emerging out of the smoke and there's like 25 dudes in there all sitting around in a circle. And you're like, hi, I'm looking for a magic marker or something.
Totally.
Anyway, I remember meeting him in that context. And yeah, he's so awesome.
Dude, that room was insane. It was like 4 bunks, couch, you know,
Yeah.
so everyone like they'd just be like creeping in the bunks, like embedded in there, so you couldn't see them, and you'd roll in, and you're like, oh god,
Oh, there's
hello.
a person there. Yeah, your guys' house was
DJ setup.
in Stratton was really like I don't know, a cultural beacon around US Open time. That's for sure.
Totally. Okay. Like we talked about earlier, you know, the story behind the graphics was such a rich topic that so many people had to like, you missed this, you missed that. This was my favorite. And boards that we had honestly also forgotten about, even though we had our own personal favorites. So we heard you. We're going to talk about the Aggression Tarquin Robbins gun board, John Boyer's early boards on Barfoot. We need to talk about Joyride graphics, Lamar graphics, those early ones from Rankwit.
Yeah.
Danny Cass's pro models, and then there's artists like Mike Perillo, Scott Lenhart, Tim Pinsky, Adam Haynes,
Sean Donnell, so many more. Like this, it's not an exhaustive list, but just to say, like,
we see you.
Give the artist the shine. Like, yeah, we want to do a few more episodes on this and get the behind the scenes. Lastly, we got to talk about episode 1, the birth, glory, and decline of half-pipe snowboarding. This was the first episode that we launched, so it was sort of I don't know, like an oh shit moment, and it was really sweet just again to say thank you because we received such a warm reception and so many people were, I don't know, just all the old names from back in the day showing up and getting excited to remember along with us and share stories was so cool. And there was a huge outpouring of love for like the early days of pipe basically in the chat, like lots of comments like, bring back small pipes, bring back mini pipes. 12 feet is tall enough.
Yeah, we also heard from like Wendy Powell, who was a pro snowboarder back in our day. And, she was reminiscing about how sometimes you were pulling out your snowboard or a shovel to fix the half pipe. Like we were building it as we rode it, to make it better. And we were all participating to make it great. This is like after, pipes were built, not hand dug anymore.
Yeah.
We're still kind of like hand shaping them with our snowboards.
Yeah, and Hoyt Hoddle the third, I believe.
The best.
I believe there's the best. I believe there's three of those Hoddles. His comment was funny. He was like, I was there, never wanted to be best in the world, just riding perfect height to weight to board length to pitch ratio. It was so fun that I hiked it till my calves bulged like Popeye's forearms. I can attest to this. So
yeah,
Hoyt, I remember Hoyt from back in the Colorado days. He was rad. He was always riding at like Colorado Series events and stuff. And he was like, yeah, until my calves bulged like Popeye's forearms. Why? It felt great to be weightless. No money, no fame. You guys rock. Maybe we get some ditches back.
We're getting some ditches back. That's the general vibe. Yeah, Hoyt's amazing. And then Seth413 was just commenting about the early days of the U.S. Open, saying the early days of the U.S. Open at Stratton were the best. The days of being able to reach out and touch a base mid-air was unbelievable. Seeing the sport progress from hand-dug half-pipes at Stratton and Magic to the creation of the pipe dragons and super pipes is wild. And yeah, just that, like, you can feel it, that moment of being so close to the edge of the US Open half pipe where you're like Cebu and like Terrier and like everyone is just boosting over you and you're like all in it. Even if you're hiking, riding, or a fan, you're like slapping high fives the whole way.
You're part of it. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, super cool. So, okay, we also had some half-pipe fan intelligence coming at us. So the first non-contest super pipe we had attributed to Brom Ridge, and the camp and sessions that they had there, was worked on by Alan Clark and others. And we were specifically talking about who had the first non-contest 22-foot super pipe.
Yeah, so we received a little like maybe that's not right from in the
So
comment
many
section
people.
from most notably from Waylon Edwards, who's an old friend of mine, Canadian snowboarder. He was on the Sims team in the 90s, and we went to Japan together and had adventures and got into all manner of trouble, and it had a super fun time. He's had to say, so ladies, the first non-contest super pipe was in Whistler on Blackcomb. I was lucky enough to be a ditch digger for that session. It was wild. We all were sponsored shredders competing on the circuit, but it was an invite-only thing. But those of us who volunteered to dig got to shred too. Then it was plowed down. I'm trying to think like 1993. So we were like intrigued because we were like 93 and there was already a 22 foot.
Yeah.
22 feet. Like this is the Pipe Dragons just kind of coming around and stuff. I mean, it'd been around for a few years, but it's we were intrigued by this. So we did a bit of fact checking, a bit of digging, and we believe what Waylon is referring to is the summer pipe that Fall Line Film shot for the 1992 film Riders on the Storm. We talked to Dan O'Pendergrass about this, who's, just like a pillar of the Canadian snowboard scene, basically, and he's a rad photographer. What he had to say was he was saying affectionately known as Sully's Gully since it was a Sean Sullivan initiative. Sean Sullivan was a senior photographer at Snowboarder magazine at the time, and apparently he came up with the concept to like, what if we built the biggest half pipe ever created and invite all the best snowboarders? This is kind of summertime environment to ride it, and and kind of invited people to shoot it and just had a super session basically. And this is direct quote from Dano. He said, while it dreamed of being a 20-plus foot half pipe, the truth is that with hand digging, the process was very slow, and there was no point where the entire thing was functional. A section would get finished, but by the time the next was done, the previous had melted away. In any case, I doubt it ever achieved the 22-foot dream. Still, the sessions were legendary, so we were right, but
I'm tired. I think I'm going to stop digging. This is good. What are we at, 18 and a half? We'll call it good.
Yeah, Rome wasn't built in a day. So, but yeah, he was talking about the sessions, and just I encourage everyone to go back and watch Riders on the Storm. So this is a famous half pipe because these are in the sections in Riders on the Storm where they had the women wearing bikinis that would set up like, and now a freestyle moment from Jamie Lynn, or like, and now a freestyle moment with Jeff Brushy. And then it would just be like a few minutes of that person like riding this pipe basically. And there was a blue rail like stuck in the up on the deck that they would be shredding to, which was also very like innovative and just like mashing together kind of rail and half pipe like at that time hadn't been done yet. And
parks were
there's
just
like
coming
a
online.
really totally, and there's a really famous photo of Jeff Brushy on that blue rail shot by Sean Sullivan. I 98% sure it was shot by Sean Sullivan, that Joel Gomez, who's doing that 45 RPM project, he has a t-shirt with that on it. I just saw the other day and I was like, oh, that's that half pipe that Waylon was talking about.
It's like all the iconic moments of that season and the time are all captured right there.
Also, just side note, the only women in Riders on the Storm were wearing bikinis. Classic.
Which is sort of classic, but then I watched I think I was saying I watched Chill, and I'm like, whoa, they open up with two women's parts with Shield Loftus and Tara Eberhardt. They're racing and they're carving, but it was really interesting that and Jean Higgins is in critical condition. Just side note, because I think we had progress and then we went back.
Yep. So Dana was saying Sims did a big shoot there too. There was the big fall line film session for Riders on the Storm. And he was sort of talking about the different riders. There's another classic shot that Sully shot of Jamie Lynn doing a method from there. He was saying Noah Brandon was unsung on his Morris Spoon nose.
Oh, yeah.
And then he was like, and Sean Kearns, Kevin Young, and Mark Morissette all got mostly left on the editing room floor, which was one of the motivating factors for the birth of the whiskey films. But that's another story. ... So more to come there, everyone.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, so cool. And like, again, like, thanks, Waylon, because like, what a rich story.
And you just like uncovered a whole other slew of information and things that pockets of our community know, but we didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then another little part about the halfpipe Fantelligence was the 22-foot first halfpipe contest. So Eric Webster, who is now the vice president of events at US Ski and Snowboard. He's an OG East Coast snowboarder from New Hampshire. He was part of that early Plymouth State crew. So Plymouth State University is, it's like nestled in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, basically close to Tenny Mountain, Cannon, Loon, Waterville. And later, the Blue Lodge crew also went to Plymouth State. So that
legendary.
College, that college has produced some good dirt bags in the snowboard scene.
I think you call them buzzards if Joel
the buzzards.
Correct.
Hey, buzzard. Yeah. But Webb, who ran the Grand Prix series from day one, shared some halfpipe knowledge around the 22-footer. He was like, I think we had the first 22-foot halfpipe in competition. They did 2007 Grand Prix in Tamarack, Idaho. Have you been there? Have you been to Tamarack?
I have not been there in the winter, no.
Okay. So Tamarack, Idaho, it was 2007. They hosted a Grand Prix there. They had like that mountain like rolled out the red carpet. They were like building this brand new resort. It was going to be the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Andre Agassi, Steffi Graf, they were all investors. It was like when we went there with the US team, it was like, whoa, this place is flashy. We're all like, we should buy real estate here and like call this our new home mountain. Then 2008 happened and like every dream was decimated. Andre and I think Steffi Graf like, boop, bye.
Sold their shares.
Yeah, side note. And now it's like it went into bankruptcy anyway. It's sort of back. But it was this epic mountain. And they kind of rolled out the red carpet for the US team. And the team built a 22-footer. They bought an extension, which cost like $30,000 to $40,000, just to like throw that number out there. But then
extension for the pipe dragon?
For the super pipe cutter to make a 22-foot pipe. And so he was convinced that they were the first super pipe 22-footer in the U.S. in the competition
What
circuit.
did we have it attributed as? The U.S. Open?
2006 U.S. Open, which he
Gotcha.
is inaccurate, but we love like...
Thank you.
Yeah, we love like digging up some other stories. We're like, oh yeah, just some record breaking. That was a big deal to be committed to the 22-footer in a small resort in Idaho, basically. And then he also dropped some knowledge. He was like, I don't know if the Tenny Days information that Todd had shared was correct either, because so we did a little bit more of digging into that. And the first halfpipe contest, this was like the New England Cup, which was run by Chris Carroll, who was like a legendary early Burton pro rider, and his girlfriend Patty Edwards. They started the New England Cup, which sort of kick-started that whole pipe and competitive and sort of that community scene that Todd had talked about early on. But Webb was saying that's like the first pipe might have been at Snow Mountain, which is across from Waterville, Snow's Mountain.
Okay.
And I found this flyer. I was like digging on the internet to try to get some confirmation because everyone leans in that 1988 is the first East Coast halfpipe at Tenny Mountain, and there's a ton of photos from it. But so I found this New England Cup flyer on the internet, and it's for 1987, and it lists a halfpipe. So we're still a little bit unclear on this, but just sort of interesting to think about that there was, a little bit of movement and motion for a 1987 pre that Tenny Mountain event. But since it's in the East Coast, it's very likely it got canceled. So we still don't know.
It rained.
It's like
Well, and
the flyer has like an asterisk next to the slalom event, and it has an asterisk and it says like it's like almost like handwritten in like freestyle event. So maybe it wasn't a half pipe, it was
okay.
like freestyle / half pipe, but Tenny was the first half pipe, and I cannot wait to share the photos with you. We're going to put him in this broadcast.
Oh, I'm excited to see it. I was thinking a little bit about, you know, how everyone celebrated the 50 years of hip hop basically in the last few years.
Yeah.
And they're attributing the birth. They're looking back in history to this one party where and I'm not going to remember the deets of like who was there and what DJ and what MC, but like basically this like first party where you know, someone like got two turntables and set them up, and that is kind of what they're attributing to it. But it was, you know, interesting thinking a little bit about like that's just the first one anyone can remember.
Exactly.
But, like, I wonder if there's like, or that there was photos of, or that people told stories of, but like what about someone off in their room, or like something that wasn't widely talked about. So there could be things. Yeah, I mean, the Tenny pipe was really documented because there were so many people, and Todd has so many of those like OG photos. But
and like Trevor was there. Yeah, I think it's just cool to be like, oh, I couldn't believe we found documentation for 1987, because in my mind it was like, no, it was 88. That's where all the photos are from. But just just kind of that collective memory. We're all agreeing it's 98, but it might have been. I mean, sorry, 1988, but it might have been 87. Like another half attended, less popular, you know, ditch that wasn't quite good.
Yep. Half pipe ravine. All right. Well, since we're talking about Todd Richards, we brought him into the half pipe episode as our live human expert. And it was fun talking to him and reminiscing, but also just like getting his perspective on like sort of the journey of half pipe through history, because he's seen so many different evolutions of it. And we wanted to leave you guys on a zinger. Part of the conversation, this part of the conversation didn't make the full episode, but he had a lot to say on about present day snowboarding kind of having lost its edge and sort of becoming vanilla and like not that attractive to different minded people, like the Sean Palmers of the world, or the people that were like nonconformists and like did their own thing. Like he was sort of just saying, we got a problem. It doesn't feel like that anymore. And he started, I'm going to call it a rant. It was rant-like.
Yeah.
He started this off by asking us a question.
Let me ask you guys a question. Do you think people still identify as a snowboarder, or do you think people go snowboarding?
I think people go snowboarding.
We've been talking a bit on other episodes about how a lot of people who learned to snowboard in like the early 90s, late 80s, 90s period, we identify as snowboarders because it changed our whole life, and it was a movement you wanted to be a part of, and all XYZ, and put us on our trajectory. But I think if people are picking it up now, I think it's an activity to do.
Well, I lobbed that question at you so I could go on a rant. Are you ready?
Yay!
So
serve that up.
I look at snowboarding as this thing where I was saying, like, people are not identifying, like, we identified as snowboarders because it was, like you said, it made you identify as a snowboarder in the sweating summertime. Like, I am a snowboarder, and you wore snowboard clothing, and you said to the world that I snowboard, even if you were like somewhere hot and bothered. And why was that? Why did we do that? Okay, so there was this mystery about snowboarding at that point. Like, mainstream media always wanted to have a part of action sports, whether it be skating, surfing, snowboarding. And that the reason that they wanted to be part of that is because we were so weird and different. We were so unusual. We had different rules. We had different lingo. And I always say, like, the spine of snowboarding and skateboarding was based on the middle finger. It was like, it was dangerous. It was scary a little bit. You know, you had people like Sean Palmer out there, and like, God, that guy's terrifying.
Totally.
But as we became more and more desperate for acceptance, and with acceptance, what we're really talking about is money. We want more money. We have homogenized what made us appealing to the masses. And now we're talking about leagues and teams, and we're calling shit playoffs. And like, what the fuck, dude? Like, and people are like wondering, where is it all gone? I'm like, you did it. Like, you killed it.
Yeah.
You made It's like people don't want to snowboard anymore because your grandmother can learn in a day. And if grandma can do it, why do I want to do it? And that's why I think people are kind of gravitating towards different things. Like my daughter wanted to ski,
Yeah.
in the beginning.
I've seen that at
She
play.
didn't want to be like us. I mean,
Yeah.
since then she's kind of discovered it, and she, the feeling of doing it and the self-satisfaction of snowboarding, etc. But we need to do a way better job of, I mean, this was such a dirty phrase for such a long time, but we do need to gatekeep. And I'm not talking gatekeeping from people, I'm talking about gatekeeping from the advertising agencies in New York that say, we know snowboarding, when really they don't know shit. They've just bamboozled somebody at some huge company that they know what they're talking about. Like,
Yeah.
and I've had this conversation with Trevor Graves at Nemo. Like, Nemo, they walk the walk, they talk the talk. There's a lot of people faking the funk. Like,
Yeah.
there's a difference between I have snowboarded, I know everything there is to know about snowboarding, or someone that's like, been sitting in the rain, miserable in a lift line at Baker and still wanting to go up the hill. Like, there's a giant, giant difference. And I feel like until we take the reins back, and I mean, I have an idea of what that looks like, but I don't really, there is no map there. We need to kind of rough the edges up a little bit again, and then maybe people will want to snowboard again. Maybe people will want to participate in something a little bit dangerous and not so nerfed out and rounded edges. And this is for everybody. Snowboarding isn't for everybody. Neither skateboarding is not for everybody either. And it weeds people out. Snowboarding weeds you out if you're not down for it. It breaks your wrist or busts up your ass.
That was my first injury.
Right? So it's like you've got hip contusions or broken wrists straight away. Skateboarding, same deal. Broken ankles.
Yeah.
If you do that and choose to come back, and do it again, you've crossed a threshold. And maybe that happened a lot more in the past because the equipment wasn't so good. The learning
and there
curve
was
a
like
little
you
steeper.
had to take a huge leap. It's like
Right.
you're not having a ride on rail, and like you're like, oh, stuff is scary to get into.
Yeah, we had gaps, like gap jumps in the snowboard park where you're like just a pile of humans.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Having people, because we want people to experience the magic, right? And
Yeah.
and underlying all of this is like there is this through line of all of these sports where it's like one day you go from doing an activity to this is who I am. And snowboarding and skating and surfing have that through line, and it's somewhere, and people discover it at different times, but it exists. And I think that we've forgotten all about that. And smaller half pipes are a conduit to giving people a direct path to the flow, the line, the whatever it is, getting above the lip. And you're just tapping into that magic. You know what I mean? And it's just, I feel like I'm so passionate about it because snowboarding gave me everything.
Yeah.
Snowboarding doesn't owe me shit, but I owe everything to snowboarding. So it's
Yeah.
like, it's in my best interest if I want to see cool things happen to speak my mind and to kind of help this. It's whether or not anyone wants to listen or whether or not anyone wants to do anything is a completely different story. I'm part of the problem. I work for fucking NBC. I work for these people that are homogenizing things left and right.
Yeah, but you're telling snowboarding
those
stories.
I try
in a real way.
How do you gatekeep it back to existence, though?
That's a really good question, but it's I would say that we don't have leagues. We don't call things in terms of sports analogies that people can understand. And I fight with the NBC people all the time. I'm like, I don't know what a sow cow is. There's no one saying a sow cow is like a blah, blah, blah. It's like throwing with your opposite hand. No, you want to be in this, you learn the lingo. You do the homework, you be part of this. Or you just simply say, these guys have got their own lingo, but I love watching what's happening. Like no one questions what a hat trick is. There's no one in NHL that's explaining what a hat trick is. If I don't know hockey, I don't know what the fuck a hat trick is. But here I am explaining to you what I don't know, like a Hawken flip is. Like, just
Right.
no, these are our wacky terms. You want to be part of this. You come into our wacky world and you unravel, you peel the onion back and you follow, it's choose your own adventure. You can learn about the history of the sport. Why is it called a Hockenloop? Terry Hawkinson, first inverted 720. Like that kind of stuff, I think is important for us to not, like I said, round the edges so that the general public, because we're already in the general public now. We can stop
Yeah.
rounding the
Oh,
edges. If we
big
round the
time.
edges any fucking more, we're just going to talk about snowboarding and not actually do it.
Well, we'll see you next time with an exciting and timely episode about an event that comes around every 4 years and has 5 rings in its logo.